Hey guys, today we're here with J.Heloise. Thank you so much for being on my podcast. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for asking. So tell us a little bit about you.
So I'm J.Heloise. I am the artist and creator of J.Heloise Art. And I also produce a line of greeting cards that sell in stores and online at www.jheloise.com.
Perfect. And would you mind telling us your website and Instagram too?
Sure. My website is www.jheloise.com. That's Jheloise. And my Instagram is j.heloise.official. And that's it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So we're neighbors at Art 150. That's where we first met each other. So tell us a little bit about your creative process.
That's a good question about my creative process. I came to the visual arts actually by way of music, classical music, which is sort of an odd transition, but I grew up doing a lot of performing, piano lessons, performances, competitions, voice, acting, and I think it feels natural for me to have some kind of creative output multiple times a week. So I think the discipline aspect of it, of showing up and creating, that's kind of second nature. But in terms of creating in the visual world, I would say the process to me has two parts. One is finding inspiration, and then one is using it. So there's always sort of a process of gathering the inspiration and then the output that comes of that. And those don't always happen the same day or the same week. And also, for me, a really foundational moment was when I went to design school at Parsons School of Design in New York City. I had amazing teachers, and they really taught me how to sort of push yourself to really get inspired. Sort of not just regurgitate what you already know, but to immerse yourself in something new, different, challenging. So over the years, I've drawn from live martial artists, I've drawn from ballet dancers, moving, trying to capture them, all sorts of things. And so sometimes I'm working from books, sometimes I'm working from, photos, sometimes things get a little more abstract and it's just like a shape or a color that's interesting to me. But I think the point is to find something that that really says yes within you and work from that as a starting point.
And are you able, as soon as you get inspired, are you able to execute that inspiration right away? Do you feel it, or it takes a few days to incubate the idea and then give birth to it, let's say?
That's a really good question too. So it depends on what the medium is, because I also write songs, and to me they're different processes. With songwriting, sometimes it's a conscious idea that needs to incubate. I want to write a song about this, or I just went through a breakup, or I might have lyrics that start to come to me just I'm walking down the street or I'm trying to go to sleep, and then I think, I think this is worthy of trying to start a song. That's more conscious. For me, the watercolor, because I do work in watercolor, those works tend to come from, I would say, maybe a more deep intuitive place. Where a lot of times the starting point is not the same as the end point. I can't predict what will happen. I just know something inspires me, and I need to get it out within an appropriate period of time.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
It's very fascinating. And you said watercolor, that's your main medium right now? Because I see you do so much. You do songwriting, the dancing, and do you get, for example, if you start to, let's say, you start to write a song in a way, do you ever stop and be oh my gosh, I just had this great idea for a painting, let me do that? Do they kind of intersect with each other and inspire each other?
That's a good question. Definitely. So I love being an artist who works in multiple mediums, media, I guess you could say. People have questioned it. The public will sometimes find out that I also, take ballet 3 times a week, or that I'm also a songwriter. And I've had people sort of get a little disappointed maybe, where I think that they think there's a little less credibility to what you're doing because you're spread so thin and you're just a jack of all trades. But I see it really differently, and I see it as a form of cross-training almost. As if we were athletes. And you're learning from each one.
A very intense CrossFit class.
And so it's exactly, so it's kind of I will definitely have parts and pieces of one that fuel the other, that goes back and forth in all kinds of really interesting ways. A lot of times, song lyrics for me start very visually. So like, I'll have something in mind, like a scene or a word I'm searching for, and that's coming to me visually. And so maybe that turns into like a color word or something.
Oh, wow,
in the
that's
song.
amazing.
Yeah, I would say there's not as much that feeds into the art. The art I like to have, I think of it a lot in terms of stories. So I like to have some kind of inspiration that almost fuels. It doesn't have to be, but usually there's some kind of a story, something intriguing about it. That's why I like working from books, or even when I was drawing dancers or martial artists, you'd kind of get to know each of them a little bit. So it's almost like taking portraits or something, maybe, where you're almost you're capturing somebody in their movement, and their movement speaks so much. Like, I learned so much about bodies and humans and humanity just taking dance class.
Oh, wow.
You know, but even if it's a traditional form like ballet, you're seeing the person's spirit through the way they dance, the way they move. They can't help it.
Yeah.
You're seeing their story, even if it's like that day, maybe they were just a little bit under the weather, or maybe they're excited, or whatever it is, or what they bring to that. And
it just like the inwards project outwards in a way.
Yeah. And so I think that's really that's a really amazing part of the process too. And then understanding myself as a dancer. But it's been a lot of years of, I started from, so like back where we started from was like the piano lessons. So I started from traditional classical music, and you have to keep in mind that those disciplines really are disciplines. There's not very much room
for fun.
And for individual expression in a sense, because the expression is supposed to be literally just that sort of,
it's like the black and white, this is it, this is the formula.
Like you have to pay homage to what the composer intended at all times. I mean, first of all, you have to master it. Your fingers have to be able to execute, all of those
to
technical
perfection,
things. And the ballet world is a lot the same, which is why I think it feels so normal to me. But somewhere in there is room for a person, if they have that artistic something, to have that speak. I mean, that's what everyone looks for, right? Is who is that dancer that is given all the same material everyone else is, but they somehow shine. And I think that's that question of, do you have that artistry? Do you have that presence? And that's
like
just
the X factor, they call it.
And so I guess it's kind of cool to sort of consider all that. I guess for me, it's a surprise that I'm a visual artist. Like, it wasn't what was expected in the context of my family. It wasn't what I expected of myself, but I always loved it.
So you mentioned earlier, like, you started with piano classes, right? While you were doing piano classes, did you kind of do a little arts and crafts in a way, or where you kind of started that spark for art and painting?
That's a good question. My excitement for painting actually started at my summer camp.
Okay.
Because I went to a camp in the mountains in the Adirondacks. Oh, wow. And it was beautiful. It was a Girl Scout camp. I had friends. It was a whole community of us on an island. And also,
but how old were you? Were you a kid?
I started going at age 9.
Oh, wow, that's pretty cool. So basically it was a Woodstock, a PG Woodstock kind of vibe, where it's crafts and artsy and stuff.
Yeah, very much so. It was an amazing place.
That's amazing.
And I learned to watercolor paint there in a very casual, informal way. It was here are the paints, here the trees go.
Oh, wow.
But I would borrow the paints because it was really casual. So I would just be, hey, can I just borrow these? I mean, they weren't good quality. And I would just paint during my time off a little bit. And so I taught myself a certain amount. I was I want to get the trees the color they are. And I think that was probably that traditional background for me of you have to do things to a T the way they are. So for a lot of years I did that, and it really wasn't until I went through fashion school and then I started my own independent career as an artist that I finally gave myself permission to venture off of the known path. And that's where a lot of the fun and the excitement lies, actually. That's where that really deep creativity is can you be within a form, but then can you let yourself explore?
Yeah.
And so I think that's how I kind of got from A to Z. I mean, career-wise, I chose not to go the music route because I was burnt out on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I chose to do a fashion and design degree because I felt that that was acceptable to my family. And it seemed like it would earn me a decent living, you know, but I took it from there, really. Yeah. I just have felt in my adult life like being creative is such a need. It's not a... It's
like breathing. You have to. There's no... Yeah.
It's not a question.
Exactly.
Like, it's like being a fish out of water when you're not able to create.
And do you, since you do so much, do you, like, try to, like, do you find yourself thinking, like, oh my gosh, I already mastered this, I've done this? Like, maybe subconsciously, do you find yourself trying, like, purposefully do new things in a way? Like, take a new class, learn about, you know?
Yeah, I always like to be trying something new and, like, exploring my limits, but you use the word that you've mastered this, and I never ever feel like I've mastered anything.
Well, master could be like, you know, I think discipline is like an amazing thing to conquer and master. It doesn't matter like how far you go in life. If you're able to like, you know, constantly work on something, to me, hey, you're mastering it. And a lot of people, you know, they're like, oh, whatever, I'll do later. You master something. That's, you know, I've been learning, like, you got to give yourself credit for the small things and the big things because they really matter. So yes, you mastered it. Say it loud, you mastered it.
That's true. No, right? Within fashion illustration, I got to a point where I was able to do accurate fashion drawings. I was able to render the fabrics. I was able to even change my fashion croquis to accommodate different figures, and all of that took years of work to do. And I think that was some of when I started to let myself venture off the known path. Yeah. You know, because in a sense I had, but mentally it was a struggle to give myself permission. Yeah.
You were like a little hesitant, like pulling yourself back in a way.
Well, and I felt ashamed for a while about the work that was coming out of me, to be honest. I mean, that just happens sometimes. Yeah. Where I was doing fashion faces, but they weren't so fashion-y. Like, this was at a time, this was like, because I left for Vermont, I left New York City in 2000, at the end of 2008. And I thought, well, I have to keep this going. I have to keep doing this fashion stuff. But when I would do these fashion faces, they were like messages like the word bitch on an angry face. Yeah. But it was meant to be a question. Like, it was meant to cause people to think a little harder. Because when you see a woman and you see bitch, you assume that label applies to her. But what does that really mean? Yeah. And so I gave it the title, Not a Bitch, Just Angry. She's angry. Does she have a right to this anger? I think she does, you know. But, you know, there's a story there we haven't explored. But I was ashamed of that work when I did it because at the time, the fashion industry was all about just, like, shopping. Like, it was so...
consumerism,
so consumer-driven and so excessive. And everything was actually, you know, it was all these furs and the jewels. And, you know, like, we're in a different time now. We're in a post-pandemic moment. But back then, I was ashamed of the work I was doing because I didn't think I could get hired that way.
Oh, okay.
I thought, well, I'm supposed to be doing these cute shopping bag women shopping, right? But I wasn't. But now I look at that work and I say there was something to that. I was telling real stories.
Subconsciously, you're putting something out that you thought mattered in a way.
Yeah, I mean, they were honest stories.
Absolutely,
you know, they rang true to me. There was something I could see in the models and in the work that resonated, and that was what was driving it forward.
And I want to ask you, like, what's something you wish, like, if you were to see, like, a younger self of you, like, your younger self, like, 20-year-old, what would be something that you would tell yourself?
Oh, my goodness. Take a business class
Take a business class. That's very good, yes.
No, I mean, it would mostly be financial things just because, you know, a lot of people don't understand, like, that in order to actually not just produce work, but to sustain yourself that way, to be selling the work, to be showing it and sharing it with the public, like, that takes a huge amount of infrastructure. It takes a lot of everything, time, marketing support, admin, tech, money, whatever. Yeah. I had no idea what it was going to take. And, you know, I wish I'd done some things differently. I mean, honestly, just having real estate, like, just having my own space to work. Because I went through a lot of housing instability. I lost my first art studio in Vermont. Like, So that's been a journey. I mean, certainly I made some good art out of the journey, but...
Well, that's always good, right?
I probably would have told myself, honestly, like, you have no idea what you are capable of, and it is actually great things.
Yeah.
So just keep following that path. Like, there will be ups and downs, but, like, the work is going to get better and better, and you're going to love it more, and you're going to meet cool people on the way. You know, so this is your journey. Like, enjoy it.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier about your studio. Do you think, because I talked to our previous guest, they said that, like, having a studio space really changed their work and their outlook in life, you know, as a person and as an artist. Do you think, like, having a space where you can come, start something, not have to, like, move, let's say, like, if you use your kitchen table, for example, you create, but at a certain time you need to, like, hey, I need this table back, so I'm going to put my supplies back. Like, do you think that helped your work a lot?
Yes, absolutely. And it's funny because you mentioned the kitchen table, and I literally have a roommate who I'm still friends with, but both of us remember the argument that we had when she came home from, like, her dissertation stuff, getting her PhD, and I was, like, all over the dining table with my art stuff, and she could not. It was,
oh my gosh.
It was a problem. I mean, I would say, I'm going to speak in extremes, but I think in this country there's, like, an absolute crisis in terms of what artists need versus what is available to us. And I think that it is so essential for every artist to have a sacred, dedicated workspace.
Absolutely.
Where they can control the variables, and whatever it is they need for success, they have there. And it's not a lot. You think about it, we're a country that's full of buildings, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And all we need is just, like, a small...
small budget, like, just a small sector, like a public art sector where, you know, it's like, here's the knowledge, here's the, like, let's say, grant, here's, how, like, where to go next, you know, just the basic knowledge, because knowledge is power, and power is money, you know?
Right.
So...
I think also our systems are not very well set up to... Even the grant systems, they're not set up to help sustain artists in the long term. Like, if you want to have a career from the time, let's say, you finish school, maybe you're 25 or something like that, through, let's say, 60. I mean, that is a lot of years, and it costs a lot to live in America. Cobbling together these tiny little grant amounts that take you just as long to apply as it does to pay for, it makes no sense, honestly. They're not, to me, they're not a setup for long-term career success for artists. They're a setup for a nonprofit. A
quick fix, in a way.
Yes, they're a quick fix that it sounds like we're doing something, but to me they're set up for a nonprofit to be able to take in a lot of funds, distribute them, look like they did their job, sign off on it, and get more funds. But really, I hate to say it, but the ones who are getting paid the most consistently are the administrators. And I don't say that to insult anyone. I mean, certainly they're doing an important role, but there isn't enough to go around. Like, the pot simply isn't big enough to be supporting all of us in substantial ways. And I think it really is taking away from artists' ability to work. And the studio itself is only one piece of the puzzle, unfortunately. Like, definitely it's made a big difference in my life.
Do you like, because I remember, like, we first met because I went to Art 150, but then I remember, like, seeing your art on a deeper level, like, interacting with it was when I curated the show back in May last year. And I remember, like, setting it up, and it was amazing. Everything fit perfectly well.
It was a great show.
Yeah, amazing, yes. We should do, like, a little throwback. But what I remember was, like, the public interacting with your art. Because there's so much, like, details, there's watercolor, so people, like, look far away, then you, like, zoom in their face and get closer and closer. As an artist, do you like seeing, like, people interact or ask questions, or sometimes, like, assume thing and be like, hey, is that, like, what I think it is? No, it's this. Do you like that kind of process?
Yeah, yes. I do feel that it's an important part of, like, the lifespan and the cycle of being a creator. Or creative, is you are creating with the intent and the hope of somebody appreciating your work. And I think it can feel really fulfilling to have somebody appreciate it. It no longer gives me the same, like, high that it used to, I guess. I know that sounds weird. But I guess what I mean is, like, you get further into the discipline, to me at least, of being an artist and a creator, and, like, the validation becomes less important. And it's more a question of, like, feedback, like, is this a new, substantially new input? Has this person offered me some insight into the work or some suggestion of a direction I can take it in next? Or, you know, certainly you want to allow yourself that joy of like, oh, wow, they love it and I love it and this is all great and this is happy. But it's, there's so many levels on which I'm problem solving in a given moment that at this point, like, I don't know, I would almost imagine it to be like, you know, somebody who's like played like 1,000 concerts, like just did Madison Square Garden. You're like, you just did Madison Square Garden. They're like, yeah, like I really just like need to have a pizza and chill.
I get it. Yeah.
But I love that we're doing these shows, and I love that the work is being seen, because that is a lot of what keeps me going. You know, just a side story here. When I was in Vermont, I was first starting to put my work out there. I had a couple of really impactful experiences where people, specifically two totally different men, told me that my work really spoke to them because their mothers had also been watercolor painters.
Oh, wow.
And they had entire boxes of their work in their attics or whatever.
Oh, wow.
One of them even really wanted to show me, and he was very strongly urged to show me this work and share it with me, because he said, I know she was an amazing painter. She never really had much time to do it. She did these paintings. They've just sat in our attic. And it really shifted my perspective a little bit, because I always knew that having a career was important to me and doing creative work. But something changed where I kind of had to say to myself, like, you need to pick up where these women weren't able to. It
was like now and ever, basically. Like,
like I'm doing this for all the women who could, whose work never made it out there, never made it to museums. Like, I want to produce something that someone will take seriously. You know, I want it to have longevity. I want it to be used and appreciated. So I'm always like meshing that product design side, because that is like a side of me, but also with that, just like, I want to make the art that somebody wants to keep in an attic and share with someone. They want to keep it on their wall, like they, you know. So
there's like that interaction relationship. No, I totally understand that.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing that, you know, it connected so much with that gentleman that everybody had his mother, and he wanted to show her work to you. That's, I think, like the best things of being an artist, you know. It's like that human connection, or that's pretty chill. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I was thinking about, so before I came in here, I was like, oh, I wonder what he's going to ask me. But I was kind of thinking about just my own path as an artist, and what it means to be a woman artist. And it's not something I actually like to talk about much, because I don't like to be pigeonholed by my gender. When I create, I feel like it comes from a space of no gender. It comes from a space of just really clear seeing humanness. And that's something that I've never questioned. I just kind of knew. It's almost like you're performing a piano piece, and what difference does it make? What the composer was, what I am. Like, these are the notes, and this is me playing it. And
what the melody is, or whatever.
But I feel like we live in a world that's always trying to categorize people. And so I guess when I say I'm doing this for all women or whatever, it's only because I didn't realize how many barriers there were or could be to achieving whatever you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. And that goes like in every profession. Like all the women before you that kind of opened doors, like kick those doors down, so then your journey was a little easier, and then you can make the next, you know, person's journey a little easier and break those barriers and doors. So it's like, basically in the end, we're all connected, and we're all like, you know, present time, like past, future. We're all like getting help from the previous generation and helping the up and coming generation, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, totally. You're so right. And also, I love that art has this ability to speak to you from the past or the future. And you can look at somebody's work. I always loved that as a kid. I don't know like how you experience museums, but I used to love to go up to like really as close as they would let me to like, you know, the oil paintings actually, which is funny because I don't do oil painting, but I love seeing the brush strokes. Just like immortalized, and you're like, that's where the hand was. That's what it did.
Oh my gosh, because I always loved to, even since I was a kid, going to museums or seeing whoever's works I'm looking at, where they start and where they finish. To me, that's always like that thought of like trying to figure out the work, like, you know what I mean?
Oh,
I find it like so fascinating.
I never did that.
Yeah, because like you said, I look at the brush stroke, and then I look at like try to figure out what kind of medium they used,
Right.
and then when I back away a little bit, I'm like, oh, I wonder where they started. I wonder where it was finished, And if you really focus on it, you can kind of like get the vibe and see it.
I like that. Maybe I need to do that.
You should do that. Well, once you do that, it's like a hook. Like you just get hooked on it. You just want to like try the next one. Because sometimes it's almost like lottery. Like sometimes you play, you win, sometimes you don't. But it's like the thrill of playing.
That's cool.
Yeah. And going back to inspiration, I wanted to ask, since you do so many things, you do the ballet, the piano, the songwriting, how do you? Well, first of all, how do you have the energy to do everything? And then how do you execute your ideas? Like, how are you able to, like, if you're, let's say, like, you're doing ballet, like, are you in the moment of that, like in a trance with the dance? Or are you, like, kind of thinking, oh, this movement from my arm would be, like, a beautiful, like, hand painting. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm kind of like that. Like, I get distracted very easily, and that's where my good ideas come from.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's a good question. So first I want to start by saying I am not in any way a real dancer. I mean, I'm not a professional dancer. I'm not trying to be. So to me, each one of these artistic media, I guess, is in a very different phase. Like, I'm furthest along with the visual arts because I went to school for it, and I've been doing this for more than 15 years. I've taken freelance projects professionally. That's much further along even than songwriting, because I did study music as a kid, but I taught myself guitar, at age 19. I picked it up again at 21, whatever. And that was a much more casual thing. I didn't start writing songs till I was in my early 30s. And ballet, more than anything, I think ballet just gives me the grounding and the discipline of being in my body. Yeah. And it's just an alternate practice. It's kind of like a person might do yoga, but for me, ballet speaks to me. My teacher's really serious. So if you take your mind off the combination for like 2 seconds, like, you have messed up. She will let you know you messed up.
Oh, she lets you know?
Yes.
Uh-oh.
It's like, we all love her dearly. Yeah. That's why we keep showing up. But it is not an easy class.
No, I can imagine. Ballet is like super hard.
It's very hard, and I think it's a disappointment to myself that I'm not able to be better at it. Yeah. Because I actually think if I had started young and that had been the thing that I did, like, I would have gotten quite good. But I hardly moved as a kid. I was in front of the piano, or I was sitting there drawing, and maybe that's my nature. But I think my impulse to want to draw dancers comes from a place of I can't do that. So, and it's also a great way of understanding the body. I love that each medium can teach you different things. You can accomplish different things with it. I think music has the ability to speak to people so directly. Yeah. Like, it's a real, like, when it, like, tugs at your heart, like, it's so instantaneous.
I feel like it's like, it's like an instant, like, you can feel the exact emotion. Where art kind of, like, warms up a little bit, and then boom, you're there, Yeah, like, I think art, depending on what it is, can do all kinds of things for you, but it's a little bit more, I don't want to say intellectual, but there's some it's just different. Yeah. The way that a person consumes it, I guess. But you asked about inspiration, and one thing I wanted to touch on was that for me, I don't think there's ever a shortage of things that I could be inspired by. Just because I love the visual world, and I can usually find things, whether it's a sunset or a landscape or a building or, a person's face or whatever. But I've found over the years that it's important to set myself up for success in creating the output. And that's often the harder part at this stage is it's almost like a performance. How are you setting yourself up for a good performance? Yeah. So how do I do that good work? Yeah. And sometimes it is a question of finding the right inspiration, but a lot of it is a question of, like, timing. Can you keep yourself available? Can you keep your mind space clear? Can you keep yourself focused? Is this the right time to sit down and do the work? And that's where
having a studio factors into the equation. That's where, do I have to stop what I'm doing and go to a part-time job for 3 days in a row? Those things make a difference, because if your life is not available, free and available for you to step into the impulse to create, and more than once, because not everything you produce is going to be good. You may have to go through 4 rounds before something good turns up. And I think a lot of what our society doesn't understand about the process is, like, they have a term, one-hit wonder. You know, and you might see the output of a good artistic performance from somebody and assume, oh, well, great, that only took them 2 hours, or, you know, I could do that, or whatever. But the truth of it is that it has to be a full life. You know, so I have to get to know myself well enough to know that 7 hours or 6 hours of sleep is not going to work. You know, or if starting a work at midnight, which maybe I could do when I was in my 20s, like, it's not going to work now. Or even something as simple as, like, I can't have people having arguments in the background while I'm trying to paint. I can't have somebody interrupt me, because watercolor is super unforgiving. So during the times when I had to work out of my apartment space shared with roommates, sometimes those issues were coming up. You know, roommate and her boyfriend arguing, like, that completely disrupts the flow of my work. It's not
like the artistic flow.
It's like literally sending somebody to the Olympics. And they get partway through their ski round, and you're like, oh, hold on a second. Like,
an avalanche comes and says, wait a minute, you can't. It stops you completely.
Or like someone just stops them and is like, hey, can I tell you a joke? Like,
and you're like, hello, I'm in the middle, exactly. That's so funny. That's really cool.
So I just wanted to bring that component into it, because I feel like the public, a lot of times, like, they see the output and they love it and they appreciate it, and they want to know, well, how does an artist do this good work or whatever? And you don't just do the good work. You know, you train, you practice at it, you find a time and a space that's going to work. You set yourself up for success. They
don't see, like, the many endless hours that took for you to get to that piece, or just to get to that, you know, that state. Sorry, my pants are so noisy.
Well, and the mental game, too. That's like another thing that, you know, I do Buddhist meditation, and I was really glad to find it, because early on in my career I was having a lot of mental struggles with, like, feeling just a lot of swings of, oh, I'm doing really well, or I'm doing so poorly, and, like, how do you get
that balance?
The mental game is hard, especially with visual work, because I feel like something about a medium like ballet, maybe you have a whole team of people there, maybe people you've competed with just to get the role. You have coaches, you have an audience. Like, there's no time or space, as far as I can tell, to do, like, a whole lot of
spontaneous stuff in a way.
So you're not going to get on stage and be like, oh, I'm doing so well today, let me try this, let me try that. Like, it's very scripted, whereas, like, the process of creating from scratch, like, you're just doing one thing after the next, one color, one brushstroke, whatever. You know, if you don't learn to work with your mind, I think that's the work of it. A lot of the work of it
that's like the fundamental.
Do you find that you feel like there's a lot of mental work in what you're doing?
It really depends how complex the work is. Most times, to me, the biggest problem is, like, executing the idea to have the finished product look like exactly like the idea. To me, that's the biggest problem. But, like, the process in between, it really depends, you know. It depends, like, what I'm, like, my mood. It depends, like, how I'm feeling, if I slept well, if I didn't. But yeah, like, to me, the biggest struggle is, like, I'll think of, like, a prototype for a chair, like a sculptural chair, and in the end, it's like, it's really difficult to get the exact idea. Sometimes it works, and it's the most, like, gratifying feeling, but then when it doesn't, it's, like, the most devastating feeling, because you feel, like, so bad. You're like, I can't go on, this is it, I'm done, no more ever, you know. So I think it really depends for me. But, like, you said, like, I do a lot of, like, Tibet meditations, like, is that how you pronounce it? Tibetan, yes. Monks meditation, and that helps me a lot to, like, clear, because sometimes, like, you know, you're thinking about life when you get to the studio. If you're not able to shut that personal life with your work life, sometimes you can use both and they work great, but then sometimes if you work with something very complex that, you know, to me requires a lot of planning and, like, infrastructure, a lot of math that I'm not really good at, then I have to be able to divide the one or the other, because then I might as well just stay home and sleep in, because it's like nothing's going to come out of it.
I can see that, yeah. And do you find that like when you do get to a result that feels right, like that you wanted or whatever, do you have those moments of feeling like a really intense satisfaction?
Oh my God, 100%. It's like the best feeling. It's like that will happen, and then I walk in the street, it's just like I feel like I'm vibrating with like positivity, and I feel like people feel it too, you know, like it's just different, you know. But then when it doesn't go right, you're just like, I feel like I'm vibrating with like disappointment and sadness, and then people can feel that too, you know what I mean? But then when that does happen, that amazing thing happens, other things in my life start to go amazing as well, like things that I couldn't figure out how to do, whether it's like it's like art related, but it's not just, you know, for painting, like the podcast, you know. I had like an amazing I was able to like complete an amazing sculpture I was doing for my previous show in December in New York, and then I had the idea for like how to, you know, do the podcast, whether it's gonna be like video, if it's gonna be online, like through Zoom, and like, no, let's get the artist in the studio, get the vibe off the energy, you know what I mean? So it was like one thing, like, you know, kind of, how do you say, what's the right word in English? Sorry.
One thing led to another?
Yeah, one thing like kind of led to another. There was another
like a
word.
creative brainstorm?
No, I forgot. There's like a specific word, and I always forget this word in English. But I'll remember it later, no worries. But it's like one thing leads to, let's just,
know.
yeah, now I want to know too. It's like on the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember. But let's just go with the lead. So one thing leads to another, and if it's like a positive, we'll get a like bigger positive. Unfolds. It's kind of, I probably said it like so many times in my other interview that my brain is like, okay.
You're going to message me at like 2
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
I'll remember like 1 in the morning, wake up and be like, oh my God, this is it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's curious. I was just curious. It's interesting to kind of hear how everyone like really said. But I think that is one of the things that unites all of us. Like,
absolutely.
That we can all confidently say that sometimes you are given a creation that you knew you had to get out, and you executed it just one thing at a time. And I think art kind of helped me latch onto spirituality in a way, almost, because I felt like from a young age I'd been given these abilities to pull something out of thin air, you know, like they would throw me on stage and suddenly I would do, wasn't always, but I would sometimes do the best performance of my life, and it just felt like it came from beyond, you know. And so I think in those moments, like you're kind of humbled and grateful. Yeah. So it's like in a way you could kind of let that inflate your ego, but at the same time it's like I could also confidently say, like, I didn't necessarily invent every step of this. You know, I kind of learned to work with the magic. Yeah. Right? Like, and over time you get better and better of just working with it. Yeah. You know, it's almost like you have a kid and you could say, well, this is my kid, but this is like a whole independent thing that you just learn to work with. Exactly. It's like a whole human being you have to engage and interact with. Yeah, and kind of like learn to understand, like, okay, what are their mood swings? What do they need? Like, whatever. It's almost like that, where you're like with my watercolor, like, and I'm still early on in this with music, where I'm still learning how songs work for me, and I love it, but it's still early. But with art, I'm a little bit more like, okay, I can say I want to try a limited color palette tonight because I know I just feel it. Yeah. And I could trust myself more and more. Like I can say, I'm going to venture off into some weird territory with this, even if it doesn't turn out well. I'm going to give myself permission. Yeah. And it's interesting because what you said before kind of reminded me of, I went to a meditation retreat center and did an arts retreat pretty early on after starting to sell my work at the farmers markets, because at the beginning I had a lot of trouble dealing with both the reactions and then the pressure to produce good work. Yeah. And I was really in a bad mental place about it, and because it was hard to detach myself from the results. And I felt like I needed somebody to help me. And the arts retreat helped me a lot. It helped me understand that there were different aspects to it. There's the business aspect that was weighing on me, but that had to be considered separately from the producing aspect. You know, I couldn't put that pressure on myself to produce for money, because if you don't get it right, you know, just paint the sheep, paint the horse, because that's what people want. And if you don't get it right, you won't have your income. Like, you can't do that. It's too much on a person. Because you lose, like, the soulfulness of the art itself. Yes.
and it becomes like generic and
yes,
like
and the
people can see. Yeah, exactly.
And the ability to tap into that creative spirit, and you have to give your human self permission to fail.
Absolutely.
And I think that's one of the things that the corporate world really struggles with, at trying to manage artists.
Yeah, like micromanage, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like they don't understand that, like, we don't necessarily have all the answers, but we know enough to know that we need a good night's sleep and we need an extra 3 weeks on this.
Absolutely.
You know?
There's no formula. Like, nobody like, you can't tell people this is, you know, how you do it. It's a process. And it's like a spontaneous process you don't have answers to. Right. And you can't really explain it. And then people are like, what? Right. You know?
And I've thought that before, like, art can't be formulaic.
Yeah.
It simply isn't the way it works. And it's funny because when you have an artistic perspective, after a while you can look at other industries and kind of laugh a little bit, because it's like, I always think it's funny when, like, economists and, you know, all of the numbers people who love to, like, predict with their formulas, like more formulas and more numbers, and like,
or like statistics, and
at some point they'll kind of come to you and they'll be like, well, there's an externality here sometimes where the thing didn't work out the way we thought it.
Because everything's they're so used to, like, being precise that they can't even fathom, like, the spontaneous, like, artistic, no pressure, you know, like, supernatural experience. They're like, huh? No, that's not XY, you know?
Right.
So, but it's very interesting,
Like, we work with different aspects of life, you know, and as an artist, you learn to work with those harder to predict, harder to understand, not quantifiable aspects, like qualities, you know, the way a person's mood is, an emotion, a facial expression, a color. Like, I tell entire stories in color, and I know what I'm doing, and they make sense to me. Yeah. But could I tell a finance person that they ought to hire me on the basis of I'm so good at working with color?
Exactly.
What proof do they have?
Exactly. And they can't even, like, even if you had proof, they wouldn't be able to understand it because it's so far beyond, you know, the black and white stuff they're used to. They're like, there's no gray area.
And I'm not meaning to hate on numbers people, but I think that our wisdom is wisdom, and it's very much needed in the current moment that we're at.
And it can be interjected into other professions where their professions can be helpful to everybody, but in a way it's like having an extra edge on something, like almost like a third eye in a way, you know. And how do you tell people, hey, you know, they're like, huh, it's not gonna work.
And artists can often predict. I mean, I'm able to predict I've accurately predicted a lot of cultural trends, you know, things that, you know, some people might have just ignored me or thought I was kind of talking crazy, but, you know, even when I was working in the fashion industry, I could see the potential there for it to be declining. You know, I could see that a lot of the mass market chains were going to crumble under the weight of the waste of what they were offering to customers. And just a lot of different aspects that, and I'm not saying I know everything, because, like, I don't even know I know what I'll eat for breakfast tomorrow, but after that I don't know, you know, but I think that artists a lot of times do have their finger on the pulse. Yeah, you know, I do. Yeah, I think so too. A lot of aspects of culture that we don't get credit for.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree. All right, Heloise, would you mind telling us your Instagram and your website, please?
Sure. So I'm Heloise. My artwork is under J.Heloise.com. So that's www.jheloise.com. My Instagram is j.heloise.official. And I am available for commissions. I take freelance projects in art, design, branding, and I will also be releasing my new website soon.
Oh, perfect.
So you will be able to buy greeting cards and art prints online at my website.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yes.
And all of your information, if somebody wants to reach out to you, is in your Instagram and your website, correct?
Correct.
Perfect. And is your website, like, in the meantime running, or is it, like, under construction?
I do have a functioning website.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yes. All right, so they don't have to wait for the final premiere. They can stay tuned, but they can still, you know, access everything.
Yes.
All right, perfect.
You can see all the greeting cards at the shop.
Perfect.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for coming to my podcast. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Tarik.
I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yes.
And we'll definitely chat again soon.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.